I never thought the most painful words of my life would come not from a stranger, but from my own son telling me that his father-in-law deserves more respect than I do. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city you are watching from. My name is Arthur Evans. I am 65 years old, and for the last 6 years, I have lived through a transformation I never imagined. It all started back in March of 2018 when my dear Mary, my wife of 37 years, lost her battle against a kidney disease that slowly consumed her for months. Mary was the soul of our house, a woman of strong character but tender heart, who kept our small family together with her contagious laugh and her infinite capacity for forgiveness. When the doctors at City Hospital told us her kidneys had failed irreversibly, I felt like the world was collapsing under my feet. But if it was devastating for me, for our son Michael, it was absolutely crushing. Michael Evans, 26 years old at the time, worked as a systems technician at a telecommunications company. He was a responsible young man with plans to marry his girlfriend at the time and start his own family. However, seeing his mother deteriorate day after day in that hospital bed changed him forever. I vividly remember the night Mary died. It was a rainy Tuesday, and Michael had not left her side for the last 48 hours. When the monitor stopped emitting that constant beep that had become so familiar, I saw something break inside him. He did not cry. He did not scream. He simply stood there staring at his mother's serene face as if expecting her to open her eyes and smile at him one more time at any moment. The following months were a gradual descent into an abyss that I did not know how to stop. Michael stopped going to work, regularly arguing that he could not concentrate. His bosses were understanding at first, but began to lose patience when absences became more frequent than attendance. Finally, in August of that same year, they gave him an ultimatum: return immediately or lose his job. Michael chose to lose his job. That was when my biggest mistake as a father began, believing that money could cure my son's emotional pain. When Michael moved back home after losing his apartment, I thought it would be temporary. Just until he gets back on his feet, I told myself, while paying off his debts and giving him money for his personal expenses. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Michael seemed to sink deeper and deeper into a depression that I did not know how to handle. His daily routines were limited to sleeping until noon, watching television in his pajamas, and occasionally going out at night to meet friends who, according to him, understood what he was going through. He stopped looking for work. He stopped talking about future plans. And little by little, he stopped talking to me, too. The house that was once full of laughter and family conversations became silent and tense. I was working my final years before retirement at the local post office. When I arrived in the afternoons, I would find Michael exactly where I had left him in the morning, sunk in the sofa with a blank stare at the television screen. I tried to convince him to seek professional help, but he flatly refused. I do not need a stranger telling me how to feel about my mother's death. He would answer me with a coldness that froze my blood. It was as if the affectionate and ambitious Michael I had raised had disappeared along with Mary. It was during that time that he met Jessica Miller, a 29-year-old young woman who worked as a receptionist at a downtown dental clinic. At first, I was glad Michael had found someone who seemed to pull him out of his lethargy. Jessica was an attractive woman with an easy smile and an outgoing personality that contrasted completely with my son's melancholic state. However, I soon realized that this new relationship would mark the beginning of an even more worrying transformation in Michael. Instead of motivating him to improve his situation, the relationship with Jessica seemed to give Michael a perfect excuse to avoid any responsibility. He began spending entire days at her house, returning to our home, only to sleep, change clothes, and ask me for money for his couple expenses. "Dad, Jessica wants us to go to the movies tonight. Can you give me some cash?" This became a phrase as common as good morning. At first, it was small amounts, $20 or $30 for dinners or entertainment, but gradually the requests became larger and more frequent. What worried me most was not the money itself, but the change in Michael's attitude. The deep sadness that had characterized the first months after Mary's death began to transform into something different, an arrogance I had never seen in him. He started talking to me with a condescending tone, as if I were an obstacle on his path to the happiness he had found with Jessica. "You do not understand what it is to be in love," he would say when I questioned his excessive spending. "Jessica makes me feel alive again, and if that requires investing money in our relationship, then it is money well spent." The word investing bothered me particularly because it implied there was some expected return, when in reality, all I saw was a constant flow of my money toward activities that contributed nothing to Michael's future. During the next 2 years, from 2020 to 2022, I established a sort of unofficial monthly allowance of $800 for Michael. It was a considerable amount from my retirement pension, but I justified the expense, telling myself it was my duty as a father to help my son overcome the trauma of losing his mother. But deep down, I knew I was making a mistake that would have terrible consequences. The year 2023 marked a turning point in Michael's behavior that should have served as a warning, but my paternal blindness prevented me from seeing the red flags waving in front of my eyes like banners in a storm. Jessica had achieved something I thought impossible, transforming my son's chronic depression into an excessive confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was no longer the dejected young man who cried at night, remembering his mother. Now he was someone who seemed to believe the world owed him something, especially me. Conversations between us had been reduced to transactional exchanges. Michael would arrive home usually when I was preparing dinner, and without even asking me how my day had been, he would launch his economic request of the moment. "I need $200 to take Jessica to dinner this weekend. Her friends are going to that new restaurant downtown, and I do not want her to feel left out." The way he formulated these requests had evolved from humble pleas to barely disguised demands. He no longer said, "Could you lend me?" but rather, "I need," or "I have to," as if it were my fundamental obligation to maintain the lifestyle he had built around Jessica. What baffled me most was how he had managed to justify his financial dependence. On the rare occasions when I tried to address the topic of him looking for a job, Michael had an elaborate answer prepared that sounded almost rehearsed. "Dad, I am in a very delicate emotional healing process. Jessica and her family have helped me understand that forcing myself to work now could cause me a severe depressive relapse. Do you really want to risk my mental health for a few dollars?" That psychological manipulation disarmed me completely. How could I argue against my own son's mental health? What kind of father would I be if I put money above Michael's emotional well-being? So I gave in again and again while he moved further and further away from any resemblance to the responsible man he once was. Jessica's family had become the new gravitational center of Michael's life. Robert Miller, Jessica's father, was an appliance dealer who had managed to build a moderately prosperous business with 3 stores in different neighborhoods. At 58 years old, Robert had the type of dominant personality that seemed to fascinate Michael. "Robert understands me in a way you never have." Michael told me one afternoon when I asked why he spent so much time at the Miller's house. "He has built something real, something tangible. He is teaching me about business, about how the world really works." Those words hurt me more than Michael could have imagined. I had worked for 40 years in the Postal Service. I had raised a son. I had maintained a solid marriage. I had paid off a mortgage. I had saved enough for a dignified retirement. Was that not building something real? Did the unconditional love I had given him for 32 years have no value compared to Robert's business lessons? But I swallowed my wounded pride and continued financing what Michael called his period of personal growth. The $800 monthly had become an automatic transfer that he expected on the first day of every month, without thanks, without recognition, as if it were a salary he had earned simply by existing. Jessica, for her part, had developed a peculiar relationship with me. She was polite, but distant, always educated, but never warm. When she came home to pick up Michael, she greeted me with a smile that did not reach her eyes, and responded to my attempts at conversation with monosyllables. It was evident that I represented something uncomfortable in her narrative, the father who financially supported her unemployed boyfriend. During family dinners at the Miller's house, which Michael attended religiously every Sunday, I was rarely mentioned. According to what Michael told me, conversations revolved around Robert's business expansion plans, the trips the family had taken, and the investments they were considering. It was as if Michael had found the family he had always wanted to have, one that valued material success above all else. The contrast became more evident when Michael began openly criticizing my lifestyle. Dad living in the past is not going to get you anywhere, he told me one day while I was showing him some old photos of Mary I had found in the attic. Robert says successful people always look forward, not backward. That philosophy borrowed from Robert had become Michael's new gospel. Everything I represented, nostalgia, simplicity, satisfaction with what one has, was seen as signs of conformism and lack of ambition. Ironically, this came from someone who had not worked a single day in the last 3 years. The breaking point came when Michael began suggesting that I should invest in the future of his relationship with Jessica. Dad, Robert, is considering opening a 4th store and has offered me to be his junior partner. We would only need an initial investment of $15,000. It would be an incredible opportunity for me. For the first time in a long time, I stood firm. Michael, I do not have $15,000 for business adventures. That money is for my security in old age. His reaction was explosive. It is always about you. What about my future? What about my dreams? Robert says truly successful parents invest in their children's future. They do not cling selfishly to their money. That night, after Michael left furiously for Jessica's house, I stayed awake until dawn, wondering at what moment I had lost my son. When had he become this stranger who spoke with another man's words and saw me as an obstacle to his happiness? The answer came in the most brutal way possible just a few weeks later. Tuesday, March 14th, 2024 began like any other ordinary day in my retiree routine. I got up at 7 in the morning, prepared my usual coffee with milk, read the newspaper while eating toast, and planned the day's household chores. Michael had left early to spend the day at Jessica's house, as was his custom for months. At 10:45 in the morning, while organizing some documents at my desk, the phone rang. The number that appeared on the screen was not familiar to me, but I immediately recognized the area code from Chase Bank, where I had my main account for more than 20 years. "Mr. Arthur Evans?" asked a professional female voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, it is me. How can I help you? I am calling you from the security department at Chase Bank. We have detected an unusual transaction on your gold credit card, ending in 7834, and we need to confirm if you authorize this purchase." My heart started beating a little faster. During all my years as a bank customer, I had never received a call of this type. "What kind of transaction?" I asked instinctively, reaching for my wallet to check my cards. "It is a purchase worth $25,000 made this morning at 9:15 at Tiffany's Jewelry, located in the downtown mall. Do you confirm having made this transaction?" The world stopped for a moment. $25,000. The figure echoed in my head like an echo in an empty cavern. No, definitely not. It was not me. There must be some mistake, or my card was cloned. "I understand your concern, Mr. Evans. We are going to proceed immediately to block your card to prevent further fraudulent transactions. However, I must inform you that we have registered another similar transaction. I felt as if someone had punched me in the stomach. Another transaction? Yes, sir. Another purchase for $25,000 at the same jewelry store made approximately 15 minutes after the first one. Do you not recognize this transaction either? My legs shook, and I had to sit in the nearest chair. $50,000. It was more money than I had spent on any single purchase in my entire life. No, I do not recognize either of the two transactions. Please block my card immediately. After completing the security protocols with the bank, I hung up the phone with trembling hands. Immediately, I ran to my bedroom and opened my wallet to check my cards. The gold credit card, which I always kept in the main compartment, was not there. The realization hit me like a hammer. My card had not been cloned. It had been stolen. And only one person had easy and constant access to my wallet. Michael. During the next few minutes, I remained seated on my bed, trying to process the magnitude of what I had discovered. My own son, the boy I had raised with so much love, who I had comforted during entire nights when he had nightmares, who I had supported unconditionally during his depression, had robbed me. With trembling hands, I dialed Michael's number. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Dad, what is up?" His voice sounded strangely nervous, as if he had been expecting my call. "Michael, I need you to tell me where my credit card is." There was a prolonged silence. I could hear background noise. Voices of other people, as if he were in a public place. "Your credit card? I do not know what you are talking about." But his tone of voice told me exactly the opposite. There was a defensive quality in his words that I recognized immediately. "Michael, the bank just called me. My card is being used for purchases I did not authorize." "Where is my card?" Another long pause. Then suddenly he completely changed his strategy. "Dad, the problem is that the card is blocked." That answer confirmed everything I already knew. He did not deny having the card. He expressed no surprise about the transactions. He simply informed me that it was blocked, as if he had been trying to use it. "Why do you have my card, Michael?" "I only borrowed it to buy a sandwich. I left the house without money, and I was hungry." The lie was so obvious it was almost insulting. A sandwich did not cost $25,000, much less 2 sandwiches for $50,000. "Michael, a sandwich for $25,000? What are you talking about? I do not understand." "The bank called me to confirm 2 transactions for $25,000 each at a jewelry store. Are you going to tell me that was for a sandwich?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line, fast and nervous. "Dad, I'm going to explain everything to you when I get home." "No. Michael, you're going to explain it to me now. It is complicated. It is not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." "Dad, I'm going to check what happened with the card and call you in a moment." And with those evasive words, he hung up the phone. I stood there holding the silent phone, feeling as if I had just conversed with a stranger. The person who had just spoken to me was not the Michael I had raised. It was someone who had learned to lie fluently. Someone who could steal $50,000 from his own father and then try to justify it as buying a sandwich. During the next 15 minutes, I walked through the house like a zombie, trying to understand how I had reached this point. At what moment had my paternal generosity become an invitation to theft? When had I raised a son who could betray me this way? But the answers would have to wait. I had a phone call to make, and this time I was not going to let Michael evade the truth with lies about sandwiches. The next conversation would determine if I still had a son or if I had just lost the last member of my family left to me. The 15 minutes that passed between that first call and the second felt like an eternity. I paced back and forth in my living room, mentally rehearsing how to approach the conversation that I knew would forever change the relationship with my son. Every step I took on those ceramic tiles that Mary had chosen years ago resonated like a hammer hitting the coffin of my paternal trust. I looked at the wall clock, 11:23 in the morning. Michael had had enough time to invent any elaborate excuse, but I was no longer willing to accept any more lies. For 32 years, I had been the understanding father, the one who always gave the benefit of the doubt, the one who found justifications for his son's mistakes. but $50,000 stolen crossed any limit of paternal understanding. I dialed his number again, this time with a determination I had not felt in years. "Dad?" His voice sounded even more tense than before. "Michael, I need clear and honest answers. What did you do with $50,000 of my money?" "Dad, I think there is a confusion. I only took the card to—" "Enough lies." My voice came out louder than I had intended, surprising myself. "Do not talk to me about sandwiches when you spent the equivalent of a new car at a jewelry store." The silence on the other end was different this time. It was not the silence of someone looking for an excuse, but the silence of someone who had been caught red-handed. "Michael, I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and I want a very simple answer. Did you spend my money without my permission?" "It is more complicated than that, Dad." "No, it is not. It is a yes or no question." I heard voices in the background, murmurs that seemed to come from other people advising him what to say. That infuriated me even more. He did not even have the decency to speak with me in private about the theft he had committed. "Michael, are you with Jessica and her family right now?" "Yes, but—" "Perfect. Then they can listen to this conversation. I want everyone to know exactly what kind of person you are. Dad, you have no right to talk to me like that." The indignation in his voice left me stunned. He had stolen $50,000 from my bank account and had the audacity to feel offended because I raised my voice. I do not have the right? To my own son who just stole a fortune from me? It is not theft. I am your son. Everything you have will eventually be mine anyway. Those words hit me like a physical slap. The calculating coldness behind that logic revealed to me that Michael had been planning this for a long time. It was not a momentary impulse or a desperate mistake. It was a deliberate appropriation based on an impatient heir mentality. "Michael, that money is not yours until I die. And frankly, after this, I am seriously considering changing my will. You cannot do that. I am your only son. I can do exactly what I want with my money, especially when my only son turns out to be a thief." The line went silent for several seconds. When Michael spoke again, his voice had acquired a tone I had never heard before, cold, calculating, and completely devoid of the filial love I had known for decades. "Dad, you're going to have to understand that things have changed. I am no longer the child you can control with threats about inheritance." "What exactly does that mean?" "It means I have new priorities in my life. I have a serious relationship. I have a new family that values me, and I have plans that go beyond waiting for you to decide to give me permission to live my life." Every word was like a stab wound. My son was officially informing me that I had been replaced in his heart by Jessica's family. And those plans include robbing me. Do not call it robbery. I call it taking what I need to build my future. $50,000 in jewelry is building your future? Another long pause. I could hear whispers in the background, as if he were consulting with someone about what to say next. "Dad, there are things you would not understand. Investments in relationships, important gestures, social commitments. Social commitments of $50,000. The money will be invested well. It is not as if I threw it away. The way he talked about my money as if it were his filled me with an anger I had not felt since Mary's death. But there was something else behind his evasive words. Something he was not telling me. "Michael, tell me exactly what you bought with that money." "Gifts." "Gifts for whom?" Silence. "Michael, for whom did you spend $50,000 on gifts? For important people in my life." "Jessica." "Among others?" "Among others. Who else, Michael?" The silence stretched so long I thought he had hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a murmur. "For Jessica's family. You spent $50,000 of my money on gifts for people I do not even know. You know them. You have had dinner with them. I have had dinner with them 3 times in 2 years. They are not my family. Well, they are my family now." Those 6 words contained a betrayal, deeper than the theft itself. Michael was officially informing me that he had found a new family and that I had been discarded. The $50,000 was not just a theft. It was the price of buying his place in a new family clan. Michael, I'm going to ask you one last time. Are you going to return that money? I cannot. It is already spent. Then you are going to have to face the consequences. What consequences? You will see. And with those words, I hung up the phone. For the first time in 6 years since Mary's death, I felt an absolute clarity about what I had to do. My son had made a decision, and now I would make mine. The war had begun, and Michael had no idea who he was messing with. After hanging up, I remained motionless for several minutes, processing the conversation I just had. Michael's words echoed in my mind like shards of glass. They are my family now, gifts for important people, investments in relationships. Every phrase revealed layers of betrayal that went far beyond simple monetary theft. I went to the kitchen and made myself some herbal tea. I needed to calm my nerves before making any hasty decisions. While I waited for the water to boil, my phone rang again. This time the name that appeared on the screen surprised me completely. Jessica Miller. During the 2 years Michael had been dating her, Jessica had never called me directly. All our interactions had been through Michael, or during the few occasions she had come to pick him up at home. Why was she calling me now, right after my confrontation with Michael? Mr. Evans. Her voice sounded sweet and friendly, a marked contrast to the tension of the previous call. Hello, Jessica. How can I help you? I wanted to talk to you about something very special. This weekend is my father, Robert's birthday, and we are organizing a very nice family celebration. The timing of this call could not be a coincidence. Jessica was calling me exactly after Michael had spent $50,000 at a jewelry store talking to me about her father's birthday. Oh, how interesting, I replied, keeping a neutral tone while my mind worked at full speed. Yes, he turns 59 on Saturday, and we want to do something really memorable for him. My family and I have been preparing special surprises for weeks. The word surprises made my stomach knot. I was beginning to understand exactly what my $50,000 had been used for. I imagine it must be very exciting for all of you, I said, trying to sound casual. Oh, yes, Robert deserves something extraordinary. He has worked so hard all his life building his business, maintaining our family, being an example for all of us. He is the kind of man who really deserves to be honored. Every word was like a small stab. The way Jessica spoke about her father with admiration and respect contrasted painfully with the way Michael had spoken to me just minutes before. Jessica, I think it is wonderful that you value Robert so much. Exactly, Mr. Evans. That is why I wanted to invite you personally to the celebration. It will be this Saturday at 6 p.m. at our house. Michael will be there, of course, and I think it would be beautiful for the whole family to be together for this very special moment. The invitation confirmed all my suspicions. Jessica was inviting me to witness the celebration that had been financed with my stolen money. It was an invitation to witness my own humiliation. It is very kind of you to invite me, Jessica. I accept, delighted. Perfect. I am sure Robert will be very happy to see you. He has mentioned several times how much he respects men of your generation who have worked hard all their lives. That phrase contained a cruel irony. Robert respected men who had worked hard while accepting gifts bought with stolen money from the hard work of my entire life. Tell Robert I look forward to getting to know him better, I replied, feeling the strategy beginning to form in my mind. Of course, Michael will be so happy you are coming. He has been very excited about the party preparations. I imagine he has. Can I ask what kind of surprises you have prepared? Jessica laughed with a joy that sounded genuine and completely unaware of the real source of those surprises. Oh, I cannot reveal all the secrets, but let's say Michael has been incredibly generous. He has really shown how much he values our family. The word generous made me clench my fists. Michael had been generous with another man's money. How lucky you are to have such a generous boyfriend. I know. Sometimes I am surprised by the depth of his gestures. He really understands how important family is to me. After finishing the call with Jessica, I stood there holding the phone, feeling a mixture of pain and clarity. The whole puzzle fit perfectly. Michael had stolen $50,000 to buy extravagant gifts for Robert Miller's birthday, the man who had replaced me as a father figure in his life. It was not just a theft, it was a symbolic declaration. Michael was using my money to honor the man he considered more worthy of respect than me. It was a financial, emotional, and symbolic betrayal in a single action. I called Michael again, but this time with a completely different strategy. I needed to hear the full truth from his own lips. "Dad, have you calmed down yet?" His condescending tone infuriated me, but I kept my voice controlled. "Michael, Jessica just invited me to Robert's birthday this Saturday." The silence that followed was revealing. I could practically hear his mind calculating the implications of my presence at that celebration. Ah, yes, Robert's birthday. It must be very special if Jessica took the trouble to call me personally. Yes, it is important to her. Michael, tell me the truth. Did you spend my $50,000 on gifts for Robert's birthday? Another long pause. When he finally answered, his voice had lost all pretense of innocence. "Dad, you do not understand the situation." "Then explain it to me." "Robert has been like a father to me these last few years." Every word was like taking a blow to the chest. "Like a father?" "Yes. He has taught me things you never could teach me. He has shown me what it means to be a successful man, how to build something real in life." "And that is why you bought him $50,000 gifts with my money?" "It is not just about the gifts, it is about showing respect, about demonstrating that I understand his value. And what about showing respect for your own father?" The answer that came next destroyed any hope I had of saving our relationship. "Dad, the truth is that Robert deserves expensive gifts. He has built something. He is real family. You have just been someone who gives me money." The world stopped. For 32 years, I had been reduced to someone who gives money. All the love, all the sacrifices, all the nights comforting him as a child, all the support during his depression, all the patience with his unemployment, all that had been reduced to a purely financial function. So Robert is real family, and I am not. It is different, Dad. He respects me as an adult man. Does stealing $50,000 look like behaving like an adult man? It is not theft. It is showing gratitude towards someone who really deserves it. I stayed silent for 2 seconds, feeling something fundamental break inside me. "Michael, you are going to have consequences for this. What are you going to do? Stop giving me money. Anyway, I do not need it anymore." And with those final words, I hung up the phone for the second time. But this time, when I hung up, I already knew exactly what those consequences were going to be. That night, I did not sleep a single minute. I stayed awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, reliving every moment of the conversations I had had with Michael. His words kept echoing in my mind, like echoes in a cave. "Robert deserves expensive gifts. You do not. He is real family." Every mental repetition of that phrase hardened my heart a little more. At 5:30 in the morning, I got up with a determination I had not felt in years. I was no longer the hurt and confused father of yesterday. I was a man who had been betrayed and was going to act accordingly. For 6 years, I had been too permissive, too understanding, too weak. That version of myself had died along with Michael's cruel words. My first step was to review all legal documents related to the properties and assets I had in my name. The BMW 3 Series I had given Michael when he turned 18 was still officially registered as mine. At that time, I had thought keeping the ownership in my name was a temporary measure until Michael had a stable job. Irony of fate. That precaution had become my tool of justice. At 6 in the morning, I called Auto Europe, a high-end used car dealership on America Avenue that I had seen advertised in newspapers. I explained my situation to the sales manager, Richard Mercer, a man in his 40s with experience in quick transactions. Mr. Evans, I understand your situation perfectly, Richard told me after listening to my summarized story. We have many cases of parents who need to recover vehicles registered in their name. Can you bring the car this morning? That is the problem I explained. My son has the car right now, but technically it is mine according to the papers. No problem. If you have the documentation proving ownership and a copy of the keys, we can do the transaction. I have a team that can pick up the vehicle if you know the location. That conversation filled me with a satisfaction I had not experienced in a long time. Finally, I was going to take control of a situation where I had been a victim for too long. At 7 in the morning, while Michael was surely sleeping peacefully at Jessica's house after spending my money, I was on my way to the dealership with all the BMW documents. The car was parked on the street where the Millers lived, a quiet residential area in the suburbs where Michael left it every night. Richard evaluated the documents quickly and offered me $28,000 for the vehicle. It was less than what it was really worth, but the satisfaction of the action was worth more than any monetary difference. When can you go pick it up? I asked. I have a team available right now. If you give me the exact address, they can be there in an hour. Perfect, but I want the collection to be discreet. I do not want public scenes. Of course, Mr. Evans, we are professionals. While Richard organized the vehicle pickup, I returned home to execute the second part of my plan. During the next hour, I went up to Michael's bedroom and meticulously packed all his belongings into cardboard boxes I had saved from previous moves. Every piece of clothing I folded, every book I put away, every personal object I packed represented years of shared memories that were being destroyed by his betrayal. His video game collection, his teenage soccer trophies, the family photographs where he appeared with Mary and me. Everything was packed with the precision of someone closing a chapter of his life. For good. The task took me almost 3 hours. In the end, I had 17 large boxes full of Michael's entire material life. It was surprising how a person's complete existence could be reduced to less than 20 cardboard containers. At 10 in the morning, I called Fast Movers, a company I had found on the internet with good reviews for urgent services. I need you to pick up 17 boxes from my house and deliver them to a specific address this same morning, I explained to the coordinator. Is it a complete move, sir? Not exactly. It is more like a delivery of personal belongings. The coordinator, a man named Frank Wheeler, understood immediately the delicate nature of the situation without asking uncomfortable questions. He had seen similar cases before. Do you need our team to deliver any message along with the boxes? Yes. Simply say that the belongings belong to Michael Evans and that he has been evicted from the family residence by decision of the owner. Understood. What time do you want us to make the delivery? I looked at my watch. Michael was probably still sleeping, but I wanted him to be awake and present when his belongings arrived. At 12 noon would be perfect. At 11 in the morning, Richard called me to confirm they had successfully recovered the BMW. Mr. Evans, the vehicle, is now in our facilities. Curiously, we found several shopping bags from expensive stores in the trunk. What do you want us to do with those belongings? Leave them in the bags. They will be delivered along with the rest of his things. Those bags probably contained part of the gifts bought with my stolen money. The irony was perfect. Michael would receive back his fraudulent purchases, along with the news that he had lost his car and his home. At 11:30, the employees of Fast Movers arrived at my house. Frank Wheeler personally supervised the loading of the 17 boxes, plus the bags from the car, which Richard had sent separately. Mr. Evans, is there anything specific our driver should say when delivering the boxes? Yes, tell him to tell Michael Evans that these are all his belongings, and that officially he no longer lives in his father's house. If he asks why, tell him actions have consequences. Frank nodded with professional understanding. It was evident he had witnessed many family dramas throughout his career in moving. At 12 o'clock, sharp while the truck was heading towards Jessica's house with Michael's packed life, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and waited. I knew the call would come soon. I did not have to wait long. At 12:25, my phone rang with the desperation I had been anticipating. "Dad, what have you done?" Michael's voice was pure panic, with no trace of the condescending arrogance he had shown the day before. "Hello, Michael. I see you received your belongings. They just brought all my things in a truck. The driver says you kicked me out of the house. And where's my car?" "Technically, it was never your car. It was my car that you used, and now, not anymore. You cannot do this. I can, and I have. Since Robert is your real family and deserves your loyalty more than I do, I thought it would be appropriate for you to live with your real family." The silence that followed was different from all previous ones. It was the silence of someone who finally understood. He had completely underestimated his opponent. "Dad, can we talk about this?" "No, Michael. The time for talking ended yesterday when you decided I was just someone who gives you money. Now you're going to learn what it means to live without that someone." And for the third time in 2 days, I hung up the phone on my son. But this time when I hung up, I smiled for the first time in years. The following days passed in a strangely liberating silence. For the first time in years, my house was completely empty of the toxic presence Michael had brought into our home. There were no dirty dishes abandoned in the sink, no clothes thrown on the floor, no constant noise of the television on until the early hours of the morning. On Thursday morning, while enjoying my breakfast in peace, I received a call I did not expect. The name on the screen surprised me. Robert Miller. "Mr. Evans, this is Robert Jessica's father." His voice sounded uncomfortable, as if this conversation was as unpleasant for him as it was for me. "Good morning, Robert. How can I help you?" "Look, Mr. Evans, I think we need to talk about Michael's situation. He has been staying at our house since yesterday, and, well, the truth is this is quite uncomfortable for the whole family." The situation had a delicious irony. The man Michael had elevated to the status of real family now felt uncomfortable with his permanent presence at home. "I understand your position, Robert. It must be hard to have an unexpected guest." "It is not just that," continued Robert, with an increasingly frustrated tone. "Michael has told us the whole story about the misunderstanding with the money and the purchases. Mr. Evans, my family and I did not know those gifts had been bought without your knowledge." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated the word with a tone that made clear my disdain for that characterization. "Well, Michael says it was money you had already agreed to give him, but there was a confusion about the timing. Robert, let me be very clear with you. Michael stole $50,000 from my bank account, without my knowledge or consent, to buy gifts for your birthday. There was no misunderstanding. There was no prior agreement. It was pure and simple theft." The silence on the other end of the line indicated to me that Robert was processing the real gravity of what had happened. "Mr. Evans, if that is true, then my family and I cannot accept those gifts. It would be like being accomplices to a robbery. I am glad to hear you have moral principles, Robert. We want to return everything, the jewelry, the watches, everything Michael bought. But the problem is we do not know how to contact the stores or how to proceed." That offer genuinely surprised me. I had expected the Miller family to try to keep the gifts and distance themselves from the drama. The fact that they wanted to return them showed they had more integrity than I had assumed. "Robert, I appreciate your honesty, but the truth is, those gifts are the least of my problems right now." "What do you mean?" "I mean, the real damage was not the $50,000. The real damage was discovering that my son considers me so little that he is willing to steal from me to impress other people." Robert sighed deeply. "Mr. Evans, I must be honest with you. Michael has been talking a lot since he arrived here yesterday. He has said things about you that do not match the man I knew during the few times we had dinner together." "What kind of things?" "He has been saying that you are controlling, that you never respected him as an adult, that you always treated him like a child. But, Mr. Evans, I have 3 daughters, and I know what it is to be a father. And frankly, what Michael describes does not sound like the actions of a controlling father. It sounds like the actions of a father who has been too generous. Those words gave me a validation I did not know I needed. Thank you for saying that, Robert. Also, there is another thing. Jessica and Michael have been, well, they have been having very tense arguments since he moved here. She is starting to see a side of him she had not seen before. What do you mean? Michael has been demanding that Jessica ask our family for money for future investments. He has also been suggesting that we should officially include him in our family business as if it were his right, simply for dating my daughter. Every detail Robert shared painted a clearer picture of how Michael's mindset had evolved. It was not just that he had stolen from me. He had developed an expectation that all families existed to serve him financially. Robert, my advice is that you set clear limits immediately. We are already doing it. In fact, that is the other reason for my call. We want Michael to find another place to stay. Our house cannot be a permanent solution for his family problems. Completely understandable. The problem is, he says he has nowhere to go. He says you kicked him out of the house, and all his belongings are here now. That is correct. Mr. Evans, is there any possibility of reconciliation? I mean, I know what he did was wrong, but he is your son. The question made me pause. For a moment I considered the possibility, but then I remembered Michael's exact words. Robert deserves expensive gifts you do not. He is real family. Robert, my son made a decision when he told me, you are his real family, and I'm not. Now he has to live with that decision. I understand, but then what do we suggest he do? He cannot stay here indefinitely. He can do what all 32-year-old adults do. Find a job, rent an apartment, and live independently. But he says he is too depressed to work. Robert, let me give you some advice from father to father. Michael's depression is not clinical, it is convenience. He has learned that the word depression gives him unlimited access to other people's wallets. Do not fall into that trap like I did. After that conversation with Robert, I knew my strategy was working perfectly. Michael's real family was already getting tired of him after only 3 days of living together. The reality of supporting an unemployed and demanding adult was clashing brutally with the romantic fantasy Michael had built about being adopted by the Millers. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk through Jessica's neighborhood to observe the situation from afar. When I passed by her street, I saw Michael sitting on the steps of the building, smoking a cigarette, with an expression of bitterness I had not seen in years. He did not look like someone who had just found his real family. He looked like someone who was beginning to understand the real cost of his decisions. That night, while dining alone at my table for the first time in years, without worrying about Michael's demands or complaints, my phone rang once more. "Dad!" His voice sounded different, smaller, more vulnerable. "We need to talk." "Oh, yes? About what?" About all this? About what happened? Michael, 3 days ago you told me Robert was your real family, and I was just someone who gave you money. Has anything changed since then?" The silence stretched for a long time. "Dad, maybe. Maybe I said things I did not mean." "No, Michael. You said exactly what you meant, and now you are living the consequences of those words. But I have nowhere to go." "Of course you have somewhere to go. You can go to work like all adults do." "Dad, please." "No, Michael. You had 32 years to learn to value your family. You decided it was not worth it. Now you have to live with that decision." And for the 4th time that week, I hung up the phone on my son. But this time, when I hung up, I knew I had finally recovered my dignity. On Friday morning, I took the most difficult but necessary decision of this entire nightmare, calling my lawyer to formalize the complaint against Michael. Mark Henderson had been my family lawyer since 2010 when Mary and I updated our wills. He was a meticulous 54-year-old man specializing in civil and family law, with an impeccable reputation in the legal district where he had his office. "Arthur, I am glad to hear from you, although given the circumstances, I imagine it is not a social call." Mark greeted me with his professional but warm tone I had always appreciated. "Unfortunately, not, Mark. I need your help with a very delicate matter involving Michael. After explaining all the details of the theft, the phone conversations, and the actions I had taken over the last few days, Mark remained silent for several minutes. I could hear him taking notes on the other end of the line. Arthur, this is more serious than you probably realize. We are talking about a crime of aggravated fraud, because it involves a family member with privileged access to your means of payment. The penalties for this type of crime can be significant. How significant? We are talking about possible prison sentences of 1 to 6 years depending on aggravating circumstances. The fact that he is your son does not protect him legally. In fact, it could be considered an aggravating factor for breach of family trust. That information hit me like a hammer. Part of me wanted justice, but the idea that Michael could face years in prison for his actions filled me with a complex mixture of satisfaction and paternal horror. Mark, what options do I have? Well, we can proceed in several ways. The first would be to file a full criminal complaint, which would start a judicial process that could end with Michael facing criminal charges. The second would be to attempt a civil resolution where we would seek recovery of the money without necessarily seeking criminal consequences. And the practical difference? The difference is that in the criminal process, Michael could face prison, but would also have the opportunity to return the money as part of an agreement. In the civil process, we would focus solely on recovering your money, but Michael would not face criminal consequences for the theft. I reflected for several minutes on the options. The hurt and betrayed part of me wanted Michael to face the full consequences of his actions, but the part that still remembered the boy I had raised resisted destroying his future completely. Mark, let's start with the criminal complaint. If Michael wants to avoid criminal consequences, he will have to take serious measures to repair the damage he has caused. Understood. I will need you to come to my office this afternoon with all bank documentation, phone records, and any additional evidence you have. After hanging up with Mark, I went to the bank to get all detailed statements of the fraudulent transactions. My branch manager, Karen Davis, an efficient, middle-aged woman who knew my impeccable credit history, attended me personally. Mr. Evans, I am so sorry about this situation. In my 20 years working in banking family fraud cases are always the most painful. Karen, I need to understand exactly what options I have to recover that money. Well, we have initiated the fraudulent transaction dispute protocol. The problem is, technically, the transactions were made with your physical card and your PIN code, which will complicate the recovery process. What does that mean exactly? It means we will have to prove you did not authorize those transactions, even though they were made with legitimate means of payment. Your criminal complaint will be crucial for this process. Karen explained that the bank would start a parallel investigation that could last between 3 and 6 months. Meanwhile, my account would continue showing the debit of $50,000, which had significantly reduced my retirement savings. Is there any way to speed up this process? If your son voluntarily returns the money, or if you reach an out-of-court settlement, the process would be much faster. But if you have to go the full legal route, you will have to have patience. That afternoon in Mark's office, we formalized the criminal complaint. Mark had prepared all legal documents with his characteristic precision. Arthur, before signing this, I want you to understand completely what you're starting. Once we file this complaint, the process will have a life of its own. Michael will be cited by the police, probably arrested for processing, and will face formal charges. And if he decides to return the money after we file the complaint, he can do it, and that would be considered favorably by the court, but it would not automatically eliminate the charges. The prosecutor could decide to proceed with the case anyway. I signed the documents with cold determination. Michael had had multiple opportunities to rectify his behavior and had chosen confrontation and arrogance on every occasion. While leaving Mark's office, my phone rang. It was Jessica. Mr. Evans, I need to speak with you urgently. What is wrong, Jessica? It is about Michael. He has been behaving very strangely since he arrived here. Today I told him he needed to find work or a place to live, and he got very angry. What exactly did he do? He started shouting that I did not understand his situation, that his depression was real, that my family had an obligation to help him because he had been generous with us. The irony of Michael describing the theft of my money as his own generosity was almost comic. Jessica, what do you need from me? Mr. Evans, I do not want to be cruel, but Michael cannot keep living in our house. My father is considering calling the police if he does not leave voluntarily. That is your decision, Jessica. It is not my problem. But he is your son. Jessica, my son stole $50,000 from me and told me your father deserves more respect than I do. If you and your family have decided you no longer want to deal with him, I understand perfectly why. There was a long pause before Jessica spoke again. Mr. Evans, is there any possibility that you... No, I interrupted her before she could finish the question. Michael made his decisions, and now he has to live with them. That night, while reviewing the legal documents Mark had given me, I received a final call from Michael. This time his voice was loaded with real panic. Dad, Jessica says I have to leave her house tomorrow. I have no money. I have no car. I have nowhere to go. Michael, a week ago, you had a home, a car, and $800 guaranteed monthly. What happened to all that? Dad, I know I made mistakes, but you cannot leave me on the street. I am not leaving you on the street. Michael, I am treating you like the independent adult you insisted on being. What am I supposed to do? The same thing millions of people do every day. Work to support yourself. Dad, please, we can fix this. I can return the money. With what money, Michael? With the money you do not have because you do not work. The silence that followed was the silence of someone who finally understood. He had burned all bridges behind him. Michael, tomorrow morning I will file a criminal complaint for the theft you committed. If you want to avoid serious legal consequences, I suggest you find a way to return the $50,000 immediately. Dad, that is impossible. Then I suppose you will have to explain it to a judge. And with those words, I hung up for the last time. The next day, Mark and I filed the formal complaint. The process had officially begun, and there was no turning back. A week after filing the complaint, I began receiving fragmented information about how Michael's situation was unfolding through unexpected sources. The first call came from Christine Myers, a neighbor of the Millers, whom I vaguely knew from the few times I had visited that area. Mr. Evans, I hope you do not mind me calling you. I got your number through the phone book. I am Christine. I live in the building across from the Miller family. No problem, Christine. How can I help you? Well, it is a bit delicate, but I think you should know what is happening in that house. There have been many very loud arguments over the last few days, and all involve your son. Christine told me she had witnessed several public scenes between Michael and the Miller family. Apparently, Michael had tried to stay beyond the ultimatum they had given him, and Robert had had to threaten him with calling the police, so he would finally collect his belongings. What shocked me most, continued Christine, was seeing that young man shouting at Jessica in the middle of the street, telling her she had betrayed him just like his father. Neighbors were coming out of their houses to see what was happening. That information filled me with bitter satisfaction. Michael was repeating exactly the same destructive patterns with Jessica and her family that he had used with me. First, emotional manipulation, then financial demands, and finally verbal aggression when he did not get what he wanted. Do you know where he is living now? I asked more out of curiosity than genuine concern. According to Jessica, he is staying at a cheap motel near Union Station. Apparently, he sold some of the jewelry he had bought to be able to pay for a room for a few weeks. The irony was perfect. Michael was selling the gifts he had bought with my stolen money to be able to survive. The $50,000 he had spent so frivolously had become his only source of emergency. 2 days later, I received an even more revealing call from Jessica herself. Mr. Evans, I need to apologize for everything that has happened. Apologize for what, Jessica? For not seeing sooner what Michael was really like. During the last 2 years, he always seemed a little dependent, but I thought it was because of the loss of his mother. Now I realize there were signs I decided to ignore. Jessica explained to me that during the last weeks of forced coexistence, she had seen a completely different side of Michael. His behavior had become increasingly demanding and manipulative, expecting the Miller family to support him indefinitely. The straw that broke the camel's back, Jessica told me, was when Michael suggested that my father should give him a job in the family business, not as an employee, but as a junior partner, with the right to participate in profits, without having invested or worked for it. How did Robert react to that proposal? My father was furious. He told him he had worked 30 years to build that business and was not going to give away a part to someone who had shown no work value. Michael responded saying my father was stingy and did not understand what it meant to invest in family. That conversation confirmed everything I had suspected about Michael's mindset. He had developed such a distorted sense of entitlement, he believed he deserved to be rewarded simply for existing and forming personal relationships. Jessica, how did your relationship end with him? Officially, I broke up with Michael 3 days ago. I told him I could not be with someone who treated his own father the way he had treated you. If he could steal from and disrespect you, what guarantee did I have that he would not do the same to me eventually? Those words filled me with genuine respect for Jessica I had not felt before. She had shown more wisdom and character in that decision than Michael in his entire adult life. How did Michael react when you ended the relationship? Terribly. He accused me of having used him. He said he had wasted 2 years of his life with me, that my family and I were fake, because we were not willing to support him unconditionally. Basically, he used the same arguments he probably used with you. The predictability of Michael's behavior was almost comic. He had a prefabricated script for when people got tired of his manipulations. First, he accused them of betrayal. Then he blamed them for all his problems, and finally presented himself as the misunderstood victim. Jessica, I am glad to know you could see the situation clearly before it was too late. Mr. Evans, there is something else I think you should know. Michael has been talking to some people in the neighborhood, telling his version of what happened. He is saying, you kicked him out of the house for no reason, that you took his car on a whim, that you are an abusive father who never supported him. That information did not surprise me, but it did annoy me. Michael was trying to rewrite history to present himself as a victim, and me as a villain. What kind of reactions is he getting? Mixed. Some people who do not know the full story have expressed sympathy for him, but others, especially those who know your family for years, are asking uncomfortable questions about why a man his age was not working and living off his father. 3 days later, I received a call from the police, informing me that Michael had been officially cited to give his statement regarding the fraud complaint. The officer, Detective Garcia, explained the process that would follow. Mr. Evans, your son, will be interrogated about the disputed transactions. If he admits having used the card without authorization, we could resolve this relatively quickly. If he denies the charges, we will have to proceed with a more exhaustive investigation. What happens if he admits guilt? Depending on his willingness to cooperate and return the stolen money, we could recommend an agreement that avoids trial, but that is completely in your hands as the victim of the crime. The night before Michael was cited by the police, I received my last call from him. This time his voice had no trace of arrogance or manipulation. It was pure terror. Dad, tomorrow I have to go to the precinct. The lawyers have told me I could face up to 6 years in prison. Michael, the lawyers are right. The theft of $50,000 is a serious crime. Dad, please withdraw the complaint. I will do anything to fix it, anything including returning the money you stole. I do not have $50,000, Dad. I only have a few thousand left from what I could sell. Then there is nothing to discuss. Michael, Dad, I am your son. You cannot send me to jail. I am not sending you to jail, Michael. You sent yourself when you decided to steal from me and disrespect me, but Jessica already broke up with me. I already lost everything. Is that not punishment enough? Michael losing a girlfriend is not punishment for stealing $50,000. It is simply a natural consequence of your actions. Dad, if I go to jail, my life will be ruined forever. Your life is already ruined, Michael. You ruined it yourself with your decisions. And with those words, I hung up for the last time, knowing I had finally found the strength to stand firm against the consequences Michael had created for himself. The months that followed the formal complaint brought a transformation in my life I had not anticipated. For the first time in 6 years since Mary's death, I began to experience a sense of freedom I had completely forgotten. The constant worry about Michael, the emotional and financial drain he had represented, and the permanent tension in my home had disappeared like morning mist. In May of 2024, 3 months after the initial events, I decided to do something I had not done in decades: invest in myself. I started visiting the St. Patrick's Senior Center, a modern building located just a 10-minute walk from my house, offering recreational, educational, and social activities for people my age. The first person I met there was Sarah Castle, a vibrant 72-year-old woman who had lost her husband 2 years before me. Sarah had a contagious energy and a perspective on life that reminded me a lot of Mary in her best moments. Arthur, I can see in your eyes you have gone through something difficult. Recently, she told me during our first shared coffee in the center's cafeteria. Is it that obvious? Dear, I have been in this world long enough to recognize someone healing from deep betrayal. Family. Her direct perception impressed me but also reassured me. Over the next 2 hours, I told her the whole story with Michael, from Mary's death to the criminal complaint. Sarah listened without judging, nodding occasionally, with the wisdom of someone who had experienced her own share of family disappointments. Arthur, what you did required extraordinary courage. Most parents never manage to set firm limits with manipulative adult children. Sometimes I wonder if I was too hard. Too hard? A man stole $50,000 from you and disrespected you publicly. The fact that that man is your son does not change the nature of his actions. Sarah's validation, coming from someone with no emotional connection to the situation, helped me solidify the certainty that I had made the right decisions. Through the center, I also met Frank Reynolds, a 68-year-old former history teacher who had faced a surprisingly similar situation with his eldest daughter. Frank had been forced to set legal limits when his daughter had forged his signature to obtain a $40,000 loan. The difference between us and previous generations, Frank explained to me during one of our long conversations, is that we had to learn to be tough with our adult children. Our parents never faced this problem because extended family dependence simply did not exist in their time. Frank introduced me to the center's chess club, an activity I had not practiced since my youth. Rediscovering chess became a perfect metaphor for my new perspective on life. Every move required careful consideration, every decision had consequences, and there was no room for emotional impulsivity. In June, Mark informed me that Michael had accepted a plea deal that included 2 years of probation and the obligation to return the stolen money through monthly payments for 5 years. As part of the agreement, he would also have to perform 300 hours of community service and attend mandatory psychological therapy sessions. It is a quite favorable outcome considering the gravity of the crime, Mark explained. Michael will avoid prison, but will have real consequences that will force him to change his behavior. And what about the return of the money? He will have to pay you $800 monthly for 5 years plus interest. If he misses a single payment, the agreement is void, and he will face full criminal charges. The irony did not escape me. Michael would have to work consistently for 5 years to pay me exactly the same amount I'd been giving him voluntarily, every month for 2 years. During the summer, I established new routines that filled my life with purpose and satisfaction. Tuesdays and Thursdays I attended the chess club. Wednesdays I participated in a reading group where we discussed historical novels. And Fridays I helped, as a volunteer, at a soup kitchen serving meals to homeless people. That volunteer experience was particularly revealing. Seeing men and women who had lost everything due to circumstances genuinely out of their control but who maintained their dignity and gratitude contrasted deeply with Michael's behavior, who had had all possible advantages but had chosen ingratitude and manipulation. In August, I started going out occasionally with Sarah. It was not a passionate romance like the one I had had with Mary, but a mature and comforting companionship based on shared interests and mutual respect. Sarah had her own apartment, her own pension income, and her own social circles. It was a partnership of equals, not a relationship of dependence. Of what I like most about spending time with you, Sarah told me during a walk in Central Park, is that you need nothing from me except my company. I cannot express how refreshing that is after years caring for a sick husband and decades raising demanding children. That observation made me reflect on how I had allowed Michael to transform our relationship into something transactional and unilateral. With Sarah, I was rediscovering what a balanced relationship between adults meant. In September, Michael made his first payment of $800. I received it without communicating with him. The transaction was handled completely through the bank and lawyers. There was no note, no phone call, no attempt at reconciliation. It was exactly how I preferred it to be, a legal obligation fulfilled without emotional drama. Jessica called me once during that time to inform me that Michael had found work as a food delivery driver and was renting a room in a shared apartment in a modest neighborhood. According to her, he seemed to have lost weight and looked considerably older, as if the last few months had added years to his physical appearance. "Do you think there could ever be a reconciliation?" Jessica asked me with the natural curiosity of someone who had been intimately connected with the situation. Jessica, for there to be reconciliation, there has to be genuine repentance and sustained behavioral change. Michael is fulfilling his legal obligations because he has no other choice. That is not the same as repenting or changing. And if he demonstrates genuine change over time, if Michael demonstrates for several years that he can hold down a job, pay his debts, and live like a responsible adult without manipulating or exploiting other people, then we could have a conversation, but not before. That conversation crystallized something important for me. I was no longer closed completely to the possibility of a future relationship with Michael, but neither was I willing to accept superficial gestures or empty promises. Any reconciliation would have to be based on solid evidence of genuine personal transformation, not on paternal sentimentality. At the end of autumn, while reflecting on the dramatic changes in my life during that year, I realized I had rediscovered something fundamental: my own value as a person, independent of my role as a father. During too many years, I had defined my identity completely in terms of caring for and maintaining Michael. Now, at 65, I was learning to be Arthur Evans, the individual, not just Arthur Michael's father. It was a lesson that had come late, but not too late. 2 full years have passed since that March morning when the bank called to inform me about the fraudulent transactions that would change my life forever. While I write these reflections in my personal journal, a practice I adopted by recommendation of my psychologist, Dr. Stevens, I am surprised by the deep tranquility I feel, remembering those events that at the time seemed devastating. Michael has complied religiously with his monthly payments during these 24 months. Every transfer of $800 arrives punctually on the 5th of every month, without additional communication, exactly as I prefer it to be. According to occasional updates I receive through Mark, Michael maintains his delivery job and has added a second weekend job at a distribution warehouse. For the first time in his adult life, he is experiencing what it means to work consistently to survive. the most significant transformation has not been Michael's, but my own. I have built a completely new life that revolves around my own interests, needs, and relationships, instead of being constantly worried about solving someone else's problems. My relationship with Sarah has evolved into something beautiful and mature. Last month, we decided to move together to a smaller but better located apartment downtown. It was not an impulsive decision based on romantic passion, but a practical and emotional choice, carefully considered. We share expenses, household responsibilities, and more importantly, we share a compatible vision about how we want to live our golden years. What I admire most about you, Sarah told me last week while we were preparing dinner together, is how you managed to recover your personal dignity. I met the defeated and anxious Arthur of 2 years ago, and now I see a man who knows exactly what his value is. At the senior center, I have become a sort of informal counselor for other parents facing similar situations with manipulative adult children. Frank and I have developed an unofficial support group that meets on Saturday mornings to discuss strategies for setting healthy limits with toxic family members. The most shocking story I heard recently was that of Hope Morales, a 70-year-old woman whose 45-year-old son had been stealing her pension for more than a decade. When Hope finally found the courage to set legal limits, she discovered her son had accumulated gambling debts of over $100,000, using her personal information. Arthur Hope told me during one of our meetings, hearing your story gave me the strength to face mine. If I had not taken measures when I did, I would have lost my apartment and my economic security completely. These experiences have confirmed to me that my decision to confront Michael was not only correct, but necessary to preserve my own financial and emotional survival. As for Michael himself, the few updates I receive suggest he is experiencing the realities of independent adult life for the first time. According to Jessica, who occasionally meets me at the local market, Michael looks considerably older and thinner. He has developed the physical characteristics of someone who works demanding manual jobs. Rough hands, more muscular build, and a more serious facial expression. He looks as if he had matured 10 years in these two. Jessica commented during our last casual meeting. He no longer has that arrogance he used to have. Now he looks humble, I guess. When I asked if Michael had ever mentioned the possibility of contacting me, Jessica shook her head. I think he understands he burned that bridge completely. Sometimes it seems he wants to ask about you, but never does. It is as if he knew he has no right to that information. That observation filled me with bitter satisfaction. Michael had finally learned that family relationships are not automatic rights, but privileges that must be earned and maintained through mutual respect. My perspective on parenthood has changed fundamentally. For decades, I believed being a good father meant sacrificing my own well-being for my son's, no matter how destructive his behavior was. Now I understand that true responsible parenthood includes teaching real consequences for destructive actions, even when those consequences are painful for both parties. Dr. Stevens has helped me understand that my decision to maintain firm limits with Michael was not cruelty, but the only form of love left available. The love that refuses to allow the other person to continue destroying themselves without consequences. Arthur explained to me during one of our sessions, allowing Michael to continue stealing from you and disrespecting you would have been allowing him to become an even more destructive version of himself. By setting firm limits, you gave him the opportunity to develop survival skills he had never needed to develop. 3 months ago, I received an unexpected letter through Michael's lawyer. It was not a plea for reconciliation nor an emotional apology. It was a formal communication informing me that Michael had successfully completed his mandatory therapy program and had been promoted to supervisor at his warehouse job. The letter ended with a single line, "I want you to know I am complying with all my obligations." I did not respond to that letter, but I kept it, not because I am considering an immediate reconciliation, but because it represents Michael's first communication that did not contain manipulation, demands, or self-victimization. It was simply a factual report on his personal progress. Does this mean I'm open to a future relationship with Michael? Honestly, I do not know. What I do know is that any future relationship would have to be built on a completely new foundation with clear limits and mutual respect. There would be no return to the previous pattern where I was the provider and he was the perpetual receiver. This morning, while drinking coffee with Sarah on our small terrace overlooking the park, I reflected on how much my definition of family had changed. Family no longer means unconditional obligation or unlimited sacrifice. It means voluntary relationships based on love, respect, and reciprocity. Sarah Frank, the group at the senior center, even Mark, my lawyer. These people have become my chosen family. They are relationships that nourish my soul instead of draining my energy. If Michael one day demonstrates he has developed the capacity for this type of mature and reciprocal relationship, then we could have a conversation. But until that moment, I am completely at peace with the life I have built without him. In the end, the most valuable lesson I have learned is this: it is never too late to recover your personal dignity, no matter how many years you have spent allowing others to trample on it. The freedom to live according to your own values, without manipulation or emotional blackmail, is a gift you can give yourself at any moment. You have the courage to take it. And at 67, I finally had that courage. The life I live now is not the life I had planned, but it is a life I'm genuinely proud of. It is a life Mary would have approved, and that in the end is what matters most. If you like this story, hit the like button on the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.